Yes, we can.
Thank you. For those that came in late, this is a discussion about bringing in a framework into Chalk for Desktop, and specifically Tailwind. I did cover before the reasons and goals for this, which you can see bulleted: creating a robust, consistent UI, ensuring UI follows UX directions, slowing or stopping CSS code growth, delivering the lightest CSS footprint, and aligning with the concepts of dry separation of concerns and the single responsibility principle. So one issue we're having currently is, I covered the fact that we're currently using SAS. It's just a screen capture from their website there. One of the issues we are experiencing is scaling. Currently in the Chalk for Desktop repo, we have about 81 colors, 35 or so font sizes. I scraped these stats down below with GitLab, Stripe, and Help Scout to show that how things can get out of control. It's a quote from the blog link down below, but in this case with GitLab, having 402 text colors and so on. Actually, I did a check a week or two ago, and GitLab has been through a refresh, a design refresh, and they've really cleaned up. I think I saw about 35 CSS properties. However, I went on GitHub, and it was a bit of a different tune. You can see on the right. For those of you that, by the way, may not be familiar, these are CSS properties. You have a double dash, the name, a colon, and the property to the right of it, or the declaration. And I don't know how many of these are, but you can see down here there's 400 some in addition. So scaling is an issue. And then we look at code repeatability and the dry principle. Currently, one class can specify a group of declarations, but the more it grows, the less usable it is, which makes sense, right? This block on the right, I screen captured from our Chalk browser client. It's for modal content, as you can see. Runs about 75 lines, but the one issue is I can really only use it for this one specific component, right? It'd be nice to have it repeatable. So to add to this, we're currently at about 68 SAS files in Chalk and Browser alone. We want to move toward a true content agnostic, flexible component philosophy, right? There needs to be more of a hybrid separation of concerns. The creator of Tailwind wrote a very interesting article for those of you that like to get into that kind of thing. A link down below on his evolution as a CSS developer and why he created Tailwind and Tailwind's utility classes. And I'm going to read a quick quote. It's a little wordy, but hopefully it'll elucidate some of this. The notion that HTML is or should be completely agnostic to the presentation, and CSS is or can be completely agnostic to the content, and that you can separate concerns that way is flawed. So he goes on, enter utility classes for a more pragmatic and scalable concept of separation of concerns. One of our guides that we discussed earlier. So with this, enter Tailwind CSS. Tailwind shines in four areas.
Just very quick, I'll note that so Peter obviously offered some of this to me earlier. And going into this, I was a little bit skeptical. And I thought this HTML CSS separation of concerns that Peter just quoted, I thought that was the ideal. And then I read that blog, and I thought the blog was really making a very interesting point. It was very interesting how this CSS model represented, for example, by CSS Zen Garden, why that seems like a good idea, but in practice turns out it's not. So if anybody is more interested in that, I can highly recommend that blog. It was an interesting read.
I can put the link as well. Thank you, Stefan, in the chat when we're done.
Peter, you can just share the deck with us after as well. We'll just throw it in here as a reference.
Super, yeah. So where does Tailwind shine? It's simple, It has an enforced design system, which I'll cover in a minute. It's configurable, completely configurable to our Chalk branding, and it's mature. Tailwind's on version 3.0, and you can see on the right, the weekly downloads on npm.js is around 4.5 million. I didn't check Parcel or any of the other package managers, but it's fairly significant, right? So in the simplification category, all classes are called per HTML element. I'll be showing a demo on that in a little bit. It's a different methodology than what most people know using Bootstrap. Those of you that have worked with Bootstrap, you download the install Bootstrap and you get a lot of CSS. And that actually is produced at build time as well, whether you're using that CSS or not. So here again, Tailwind uses only the CSS that you declare, which adheres to the dry principle, and it's less reliant on the SAS files. We'll cover why Tailwind conceivably could be completely or used as a complete standalone solution. However, we're blocked on that, which I'll go over in a minute. So development benefits: slowing, stopping CSS growth, class naming. Those of you that have written classes for CSS, different methodologies out there like block element and modifiers. It's very difficult to be consistent with that. There's less opportunity for layout breakage as you're assigning these utility classes per element. Small footprint. I quoted this, or rather captured this on the right. I thought it was significant. Tailwind automatically removes all unused CSS when building for production, which means your final bundle is small as it possibly could be. In fact, most Tailwind's projects ship less than 10 kilobytes of CSS. Post CSS is a JavaScript CSS solution. Some developers write exclusively in that, but anyway, it's incorporated into Tailwind, and it delivers benefits such as purge CSS, as we previously mentioned, CSS Nano for minification and other things. Installed by NPM, similar to existing libraries, and it is relatively easy to learn. So the other big thing, particularly for me, and just a real quick history, back at the beginning of this year, I approached my manager, Zach, and I just said, Zach, we got to have some kind of design system for Chalk for desktop. We're getting more and more designs in, things are starting to get chaotic. And I began to actually create one and realize how big of a project that was. And I had been exposed to Tailwind before. I'd heard about it, read about it, and so I just began to look into it. At the same time, Daniel St. George from UX came on to our team, and he and I began to have a lot of conversations about it. I began to get very excited. I brought, Hien at the time. Zach was out on maternity leave, so Hien and Stefan and I had many conversations. But one of the big things with bringing it back with Tailwind is its built-in design system. Here on the right, I just kind of show an example of a typographic design system. Most of you, of course, you're working in your word processing program, and you wonder why a font will go from 12 pixels to 16 to 20 to 24 and such like that, and that is a evidence of a design, basic design system. In the middle, at the bottom, on the left, what you're seeing here, the space -y35, these are Tailwind utility classes, and of course on the right you can see the translation to how each one steps in a proportional manner. So that's a big deal. Having a design system already built in takes a lot of weight off our shoulders, UX shoulders as well. Okay, so another big benefit is Tailwind's pre-built component libraries. There's a huge ecosystem out there of course, components. We're talking about like cards, forms, drop-downs, accordions, button groups, these kinds of things. The component library in the center, Flowbyte, has over 200 of these, and many of them are, purchasable. But I just brought this to show just the amount of resources there are out there. I spun up about 3 websites locally to learn Tailwind. A couple just plain HTML. One I think I used Svelte, the JavaScript framework, and I used Daisy UI a lot and Flowbyte, and it was very easy, very fun. It just really, you get your skeleton component, and it's easy to brand it from there. So moving on to integration into Chalk for Desktop. I've written a guide on Confluence, which I'll show in just a minute. And specifically, we had to use a library called Tailwind, tailwind.dev, because of the shadow DOM environment. And again, some of the limits that we've come across as Tailwind itself doesn't support a shadow DOM environment out of the box. So we needed to use this Tailwind plugin to just get Tailwind to work. And currently, we're unable to use these third-party Tailwind plugins such as Flowbyte and those that I showed. So, you know, why is this? We have the shadow DOM. Shadow DOM's a real difficult thing for a CSS developer. I mean, you can get around it, but it can be challenging. All right, so let's move to, this is the page I've written on Confluence. It's in Euphoria Chalk space under Developer Handbook, and it basically covers a lot of things that I've already talked about here. And again, I'd like to, by the way, I'd like to publicly thank Hien for all the debugging and implementation work that we did to make this work. It was challenging, to say the least, at times. I recommend a couple extensions here. I'll give a demonstration of this IntelliSense extension. You know, Tailwind has quite a collection of utility classes. And so to have them right at your fingertips is great. Headwind is simply an organization extension. It organizes the classes for best use. This Tailwind Play is just a website on their thing. And again, some of these I will demonstrate. It's easier to demonstrate than, you know, talk out. So bringing Tailwind into your LitHTML component. These are the 2 import declarations for, of course, one for Chalk and Browser client and Dalton Player. And the only reason they're different is the location of the config file. Then as we move down, we set up a couple of variables destructured from the get Tailwind CSS function. And I have a little blurb about bundled classes, which I won't get into great detail. I'll give a demonstration on it. But basically, anytime you have a repeatable element, such as on the right, like our green button there, we can create these bundled classes and assign them to a variable. Moving further down in the component to the static get styles area, we simply bring in this object property here. And it's a little different for Dalton Player as well. And further on, Tailwind's now ready to be used in components. So let's go to VS Code here. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Thought that was all set up. Okay, bear with me. And I'm going to just pull this out of the way. There you go. Okay. So in the center, we have our new interstitial pre-join component in the LitHTML environment. We have a live server going on the right. On the left is our config file for Tailwind. So let's just move down here in the component itself. Here we're bringing Tailwind in. Further down, we're structuring a couple variables. This is an example of a bundled class. In this case, it's the floating label. I'll just go to the component real quick. You know, it's pretty slow, like these new things now. There's your floating label. So I'll go into a little bit more detail here. Here we use Tailwind's apply function, assign that to a variable, bring that variable into this function, and again, assign that to the final variable that you want to use. So moving down to the render function, here you can see this is almost entirely built using Tailwind. right here at the top is our semi-transparent background for the modals. So I thought it might be a good element to give a demo on. Oh, and I did neglect to mention, with our environment, we need to use a JavaScript, what do you call it, template literal. So inside of that, we have the TW and then the backticks. And then these here are all Tailwind utility classes. So to pull up the extension I was mentioning earlier, I just simply hit the space bar, just like most IntelliSense things. And I want to add a margin top to this just as a demonstration. I know that with Tailwind, you just simply got MT with a dash. I get this nice menu here with a flyout on the left that tells you the actual amounts that whether you're a rem person or pixel person. So let's really move this down, make it kind of obnoxious here. 384 pixels. I'm just going to hit my return key. Now, as I save it, you'll see it shift in position, right? It's moved over to here. That is the Headwind extension that organizes the classes according to priority and all their AI. So going back here you can see the shadow background has moved down. So let me get rid of that before I forget about it and wonder what happened. Let's move over to the config file. Up here, this is all, this is Tailwind or T-Wind work here. And then everything from here on is straight Tailwind configuring. So here we're bringing in our special font, Lieber Franklin, some spacing, some width parameters, colors, and here are the a couple bundled classes. Here we have our large green button and a smaller Chopper desktop button. Yeah, so I am using that in this welcome component here. Show it real quick. Down here you can see the BTN VUF green, which is also referenced up here, and the collection of classes here too. So a further demonstration, we have a recording banner in our interstitial with a new color introduced by UX. So let me just copy this. Right now it's hidden. It will be enabled by logic, of course. Let's see here. Find it relative. Where are we? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the welcome component, not the interstitial here. Okay, let's see. Moving up here, where is our recording banner? Relative. There we go. Okay, there we are. Sorry about this. So let's remove this high class and paste in our new banner, and there we go. That is using the orange color from the config file, and here we can see it down here that's brought in. Simply append with Tailwind. Any background property is abbreviated by BG dash. So up here you can see I've added the background alert orange. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. Just to sum up what we've talked about, Tailwind CSS provides multiple benefits right now. It's easy to use. I believe it's going to manage our scale issues. It's very light build footprint, has a built-in design system, which is a big deal. Foundation for pre-built components. It aligns well with the derived principle, separation of concerns, and the single responsibility principle. As pointed out, currently we are unable to take full advantage of all this framework due to the Shadow DOM issues. Because of that, we're blocked currently to use the component libraries and the extensions of Tailwind's functionality. So just a plug, if there's anybody on this call who thinks they can help us with that, we'd be more than welcome to get your help. With that, that's it. Thank you. I also want to thank Stefan and my team. Stefan for the long conversations we had about this. Zach and Yen for your input and help in bringing it into Chalkboard Desktop. And that's it. Yeah, any questions or comments?